In the era of social distancing, the ecosystem is in favor of fintechs to build the contactless world. For this, the most powerful weapon for fintech in this new normal world is digital footprints. So the session will focus on how fintechs can make everything contactless, and I would like to invite Amol Dete on those similar lines that we are connecting online, and he will take it forward.
Hello and welcome to ETBFSI Converge, and welcome to this amazing panel discussion specifically on contactless world, payment, credit, and micro products. In this particular panel discussion, I'm going to explore the current state of fintechs, where are the fintechs heading, and what are the new trends that fintechs are observing right now in this pandemic time, and more importantly, how do they see the future? And to discuss or to get the insights on this particular topic, I have with me Naveen Surya, the chairman of FinTech Convergence Council and chairman emeritus Payments Council of India, Abhishant Pant, founder, the FinTech Meetup, Syed Mushir Ahmed, the founder and MD, FinStep Asia, and Meghna Suryakumar, founder and CEO, CrediWatch. Welcome all of you to this amazing panel discussion. Good to see all of you here. And Meghna, I will begin with you. Considering CrediWatch and the kind of work that you are doing at CrediWatch, start with how are you looking at the fintech space right now, and what are the major changes that you have seen in last 5 to 6 months, specifically during pandemic?
One of the key developments in fintech because of Corona and the pandemic is that there's been a very swift move to phygital, right? From physical to digital. And that's been one of the most important development. And this has happened on a threefold basis, right? From the policymakers, because there's been a lot of swift policy making. I'm sure that Naveen will talk about it when he talks about some of the policies that he's been involved in, like the video KYC rules came out really early in March to enable a lot of startups to quickly adopt to a contactless KYC, right? And so that the break wouldn't happen when they had to open accounts and adopt to RBI regulations. And then if you look at what the companies themselves have done, right? If you look at a lot of fintechs themselves, they've kind of swiftly adopted to moving to complete online presence. So the digital lending space per se has kind of seen a transformation in the past 5 months, where we're looking at a lot of interesting fintech companies offering different kinds of seamless contactless lending solutions. And the third important thing is the role of the enabler, right? That's the most important thing that has really, really enhanced in the last 5 months, is the role of a digital infrastructure enabler in the fintech system, right? Be it in the form of like core-based infrastructure for everyone to go digital, like open APIs, or to enable different kind of workflows and processes. And third is in terms of different kind of protocols and technology and layers to kind of happen to make digital lending happen. So these three areas have converged, right? Infrastructure, policy, and also the paradigm shift in the way a lot of fintechs are now looking at very rapid decision-making solutions to enable lending. So that's exactly what's happened in the past few months.
Okay, thanks Meghna for that remarks. And obviously you mentioned about Naveen, and anyway, I wanted to go to Naveen at the second number. I will take the policy perspective. So Naveen, whatever the changes that happened specifically at the policy level in last 12 months in the fintech space, how it helped fintechs to take a next step in last 6 months?
So Amol, I think thankfully some of the steps that we were already taking, not that we were anticipating Corona, but fundamentally we know fintechs are all about digitizing financial services. And we were always looking at a scenario from FCC perspective that if all the services has to be digital, less and less physical interaction, what all is missing? Of course, video KYC, especially in absence of access to Aadhaar for non-banks, especially on the RBI side, was one of the biggest trouble. So thankfully, we were already working on it. RBI came with a policy to allow it. Of course, we are still working on further refinement, but that at least happened. If you look at fundamentally when this pandemic happened, there were 3 phases challenges came in. The first one was all about business continuity. So if you look at from a policy intervention side, very quickly we had to kind of closely work with not just first time with the regulators and the central government, but state government to ensure that the logistics and the movement of the critical staff from the entities, for an example, be it stock market side, be it on the payment side, be it NPCI. I mean, many of them had challenges. How would they get a pass, etc. So specific circular that very quickly came out that all these kind of entities are part of essential services. Banking was already identified, they would be allowed. So it started from a continuity perspective, which I think more or less has become already a past, right? That happened smoothly. Then came the challenge, which still continues, that how do you survive this phase? And again, survival depends on a type of entities. There are some which are still struggling, to be honest. So we still have to figure out how do we really trigger a lot more M&A or a lot more strategic options for them. But let's say there are a lot of other entities who could kind of collaborate with each other. So we tried to do a lot of virtual events, meetings where they could kind of combine and work, and also took whatever government help we could. There was also in this phase, there were a lot of guidelines which were to become active. For an example, the new guidelines for payments aggregator, they were to become effective from 1st April. And while you could apply for the license till kind of March of or April of 21, but the guidelines were becoming applicable. And there were a lot of compliances that were required to be done by many entities.
Right.
So with our dialogues, at least that got postponed. So there was a very quick response from RBI on that. Similarly, on the payments, there was a rule that all debit cards needs to be disabled for all online and international payments, unless it is specifically asked.
Right.
So again, everybody was in panic that now is the time consumers who not use in digital world, and now they will be using and suddenly it's not working, it will create huge panic. So again, thankfully, we had a good discussions with RBI and that got immediately. So it's a continuous dialogue, and somehow we kind of in a survival phase. What we are looking from here is a growth phase, because there are a lot of entities who've already seen it, especially those who are on the side of tech-enabled digital enablement. Like Meghna said, this is a time entities will grow and will find this space even better, who want to kind of digitize and who are adopting the digital. So it's a continuous, I would say, still evolving. We are still in a transitory mode. We have not reached the new normal yet. This is still a transitory mode. There's still a lot more things that we are in discussion with various regulators and trying to solve them. But I think it's a continuous process. So far, it has been working smoothly. And that's how the impact has been minimal. And in some cases, actually, there is a higher growth for some of the entities.
Very well said. Yes, we are in a transitory mode and expecting a better future. Abhishant, I will, bring you here into the picture. We understood what Crave Watch is looking at fintech space, what Naveen is talking about the policy and regulations. Abhishant, you are talking to a lot of fintechs, and the first reaction of most of the fintechs was, "Oh, I'm not going to get the funding. I don't know how I'm going to expand." And there was a panic mode. So, what kind of destruction that happened in the fintech space in last 5 to 6 months?
First and foremost, I believe it wasn't much of a destruction as such, so to say. And frankly, the report that we are looking at releasing with you in the program soon, that will also highlight the fact that actually the H1 funding in 2020 was better than the H1 funding in 2019. So both in terms of the value of funding as well as number of deals happened and everything around that, frankly, the numbers have grown. In fact, interestingly, more number of early stage startup got funding this year in first 6 months versus what they got in last year's first 6 months. So frankly speaking, I haven't seen much of the downward trend as such. In fact, it is a bit upward only. In fact, we saw a continuation of that in the month of July. In the month of July in last year, the number of deals which happened in fintech space was 9, while what we observed in July 2020 was 13. So
Right.
frankly speaking, till now, purely from a funding point of view, those who were deserving from a market landscape point of view, or essentially whomsoever the VC found to be deserving, have actually received funding. That's first.
Right.
Second is, as far as impact is concerned, of course, that doesn't mean the impact nahi tha. Impact to obviously tha hi tha sahab. फ्रैंकली इस पूरी की पूरी उसमें जो गेहूं के साथ में घुन भी पिस जाने वाली बात होती है. So जैसे maybe in other maybe in a regular 2019 market we would have not seen as many startups closing down the shutter as we have seen now. I'm aware of at least 7 to 8 startups in my close environment who could have survived a 2019 kind of a scenario, but could not survive 2020 because the volumes have gone down, numbers have essentially crashed. B2B startups are not getting paid on time. I'm representative of a startup, if I can say so. I have my invoices pending with state government. I have my invoices pending with a large insurance company. I have my invoices pending with 2 of so-called unicorns from Indian fintech ecosystem, and so on and so forth. I have 8 to 9 invoices pending with large organizations in this country for last 7 to 8 months. Now, frankly, I can survive, I could survive because my expenses are low and so on and so forth. But not many who have consumer facing organizations can survive this onslaught. So therefore, consumer facing startups who could have survived in earlier environment are finding it difficult. Of course, lending ones are finding it even more difficult. Those who were on the payment side from the point of view of wherein it required a lot of merchant and consumer connect are finding it difficult. Apart from that, frankly, rest of the brigade, specifically insurance, is finding it good. More number of insurance startups have raised funding. In fact, not just in India. We just released a few minutes back a snippet on UK funding, and in UK, almost 70% upward trend in H1 2020 in insurance startup funding. So there are certain segments which have grown. There are certain segments which have gone down. A market which could have been a bit more conducive for startups in otherwise manner and would have been more forgiving is not at this point of time. The space in which at this point of time I'm sitting, a co-working space, on a normal day, it had 500 plus seats. At this point of time, we are 7 people sitting in a 500 space office.
Right.
And out of which almost 40% were fintech because we are next to BKC. No one out here. In fact, मेरे सामने जितने हैं उसमें सब में fintech बैठते थे. सब बंद है. सब का सब. So yes, impact is there, but people are also receiving funding at the same point.
So just to add to what Abhisant is saying, I think series A and B has been really massively under strain. Startups are still, if they have an interesting idea connecting, they're still continuously getting funding. Also, generally the investor view is to reserve funds for their existing portfolio companies and rather bet more with them. So that approach has some implication.
But let's hope that Abhishant will get his invoices paid very soon, and the situation, will improve starting from Abhishant itself. Okay, let me bring Mushir into the picture. I'm so sure that Mushir will give a different picture altogether because he's operating from Hong Kong. So, Mushir, you heard, Meghna, Naveen, and Abhishant, and you understood the picture of India. How is the situation in Hong Kong? What is the major change that you are witnessing right now there in the fintech space?
I think when you look at the Indian landscape versus overseas, especially Hong Kong, there are quite a few differences, right? Cities like Hong Kong, Singapore are hubs which are connecting different parts of the world, in particular in Asia, either bridging China to the rest of the world or in terms of Singapore, ASEAN and the rest of the world. With COVID, one major impact has been this connectivity, right? A lot of investors like to meet people when it comes to B2B sales. As Abhishant was also mentioning, there's no travel, so you can't meet people and present your products, right? As much as Naveen and I have held events, you are holding an event, try to bridge that gap between companies across Asia. Meeting in person is a very different ballgame because incumbents are still very traditional that way. They want to meet the vendor, they want to have that discussion. It's 2-3 rounds, 4-5 rounds before you get the project, even before you consider invoices, which is much later down the line. So Hong Kong has been impacted by that. One of the early cities to be hit by COVID because of us being on the borderline of mainland China. So we never had a full lockdown, but business has been 50% working from home or lesser for a majority of the last few months. Having said that, I think there are a few spaces which not just in India, but globally have seen green shoots or done quite well. Outside of the health tech, insurtech, wealth tech has actually picked up quite a bit, right? You've seen the likes of Robinhood and others do some mega rounds of funding, but even in Hong Kong, 2 or 3 of the major robo-advisors like Acomon and others have seen 300%, 200% growth in Q1 as compared to the previous year. Why? Because a lot of people are now sitting at home, right? Not at office. So they get an opportunity to actually dabble in the markets. And that's one of the things that's happened is this disconnect between the stock markets and the real economy because it's index driven. And a lot of the stock markets are nearing global, all-time highs, like in the US. So that's been very useful. You're seeing big name IPOs and Financial, which is renamed to Ant Group, is going to be listing in Hong Kong very soon. Their prospectus is out. So a lot of people are interested in the wealth tech space. So that's picking up definitely. There is a revival or a bigger focus now on e-commerce. Space like Hong Kong where e-commerce was not that strong because physical retail was very strong and people would go to a shop and purchase. Now seeing a big push on e-commerce. Also healthcare driven e-commerce, but other general e-commerce. Thirdly, I think there is a big increase in overall contactless payments, right? So where it was not existing, so POS suppliers and others, right, they will do much better. Even otherwise, you're seeing a reduction in number of people withdrawing from ATMs and preferring to use contactless. In markets like Hong Kong, which have a very high saturation of credit card users and credit cards itself, you are seeing that completely increasing it because you're being encouraged to go contactless because cash was king in Hong Kong, though that's starting to transition. And I expect in India as well, it's a dichotomy of saying one side you have payments where people are doing a lot of online payments and others, and there's an increase in number of users, but the value or the overall transactions will be lesser because you're not having people do anything beyond their regular needs, right? And essentials is there, whereas everything else is on hold. And I think once COVID goes away and we're seeing a lot of people going back to normal life in India and other parts of the world, then you will start seeing that as a pickup slowly, probably early next year. When it comes to funding, just as a preview, very much in line with what Naveen was saying, which is a lot of VCs are investing in their current portfolio companies. Where I have seen the biggest growth has been in acquisitions or fundings by corporate M&As, right? So many of the corporates, including global giants like Visa, JP Morgan, and the others, have been putting in money into strategic startups, and that's been a space, especially in payments and digital assets, which has grown quite a bit here in Hong Kong.
Very detailed perspective, Mushir. Thank you for giving point by point description about what exactly is happening in Hong Kong. I will come back to Meghna, and everybody is now, obviously it's not that we didn't speak about the digital world earlier, but now the whole agenda is contactless world. Maybe it's payment, credit, whether we are crafting new micro products or something, everything has to be contactless, not only because of the seamless digitalness, but also because of the social distancing and all those things. So Meghna, going ahead, what kind of models you see specifically developing into fintech space, because everybody is heading towards contactless world?
So I think one of the most important development would be that the entire ecosystem will become interconnected. That means that the payment layer, the infrastructure layer, then the data layer, the analytics layer, and finally the workflow layer, all of them will seamlessly integrate into a fintech stack, which means that let's say that you are a Swiggy restaurant on Swiggy, right? If you need to avail credit tomorrow, instantly within your Swiggy app, you would have access to lenders, and within a few clicks, you'd probably even get the money, because the payment layer, the due diligence layer, the infrastructure layer, and even the layer where the banks evaluate you and even do your KYC, all of them will merge across 7 to 8 participants into one seamless workflow, where funding will be available at a click to most small businesses, right? Whether it could be through a marketplace like the Zomatos and Swiggies of the world, or it could be through a Make My Trip, or it could be through a Bank Bazaar, or any point where there's a distribution available. It could even be a B2B commerce player like an Udaan, where there are many merchants, right? Or it could be a Super Kirana. It could be any place where there are small businesses doing trade. At that point, the trade transaction will merge with the credit transaction. So now what we're going to see is the amplification of trade velocity, because credit will become available at the point of trade. And that's going to be one of the most important developments that we're going to see now in the next couple of months in fintech in India today.
Very interesting thoughts, Meghna. In fact, I have been listening a lot about bankers talking about providing a Swiggy-like experience, Netflix-like experience. You also partly mentioned that. Naveen, what is your view? If the fintech and the banker wants to provide a Swiggy and Netflix-like experience, what are the policy changes that we need to do, or the current policies are absolutely in line to go ahead with all the partnerships and the collaborations?
Thankfully, the technology is in place. I mean, there are possibilities where you could actually deliver an experience. I would say that even beyond what Swiggy or OTT players provide, fundamentally all financial services in my mind are actually a layer following the regular real life transactions. I mean, what you want is food, not necessarily a credit for it, right? That's a means to get it. What you want is not necessarily a payment, but let's say you want to buy and fill a fuel, then you want it to happen. What has happened over a period of time, all this has added to activities and processes. If you want to pay, you have to take your card out, money out, do certain steps, and then it has to happen. So it gets into a contact world, right? Now, again, even your laws have been put in, because first time when these processes and activities were added, they were actually examined against certain risk of that time. and you put down certain controls and steps against that. And unfortunately, most of the laws are still written in those detailed form. And while we continue to work with the regulators that let's try and reach a situation where we have a principle-based regulations, and a lot of other work can be evolved by SRO kind of framework, which gradually is coming in place. We're not there yet. So I would say the mindset is open, the technology is available, infrastructure is available. But can we start using that and deliver an experience where all these steps and activities, they simply go away and it happens seamlessly? For an example, if I'm going actually to fill up fuel, do I really need to step out or even take a card out? If it's a card which is smart card, fit with IoT devices, why can't with my voice command or simple with one click, the payment gets processed, right? Well, theoretically, some of these are possible. But let's say there is a lot more steps that today requires a specific activity, which takes you back to a physical activity. Right. For example, even in take example of, let's say the video KYC, amazing policy, everything good, but somewhere it requires a warm body to be there. When we understand that it was a new technology, but given a time like this, when warm bodies are less, or let's say they may not be physically available at a particular point in time to monitor that process, it can happen directly in a virtual way. So what we need to do is accommodate a lot more of not just the internet world, but also the IoT world, but also the AI ML world, and allow some of those decisions to happen in background. We should remove all those extra addition and create a better experience, which actually is not just because of COVID, but also even otherwise can be delivered and can actually expand and can also bring consumers, not like us. We are educated, we can do this process. Actually, one of the key problem is for the people who are not educated enough for them to do these steps, extra steps, be it credit, be it insurance, is actually a humongous task. They don't understand what exactly they're doing. They're simply doing what they're told, and that actually also becomes a barrier. So we would say that policies are supportive, the mindset is open of regulators, but there are still a lot of, let's say, nuts and bolts that needs to be tightened or removed completely to make it work in a new world. But we will get there. I think good part is that ultimately infrastructure for a lot of these has come in place where it can be enabled. We just need to give that confidence that these risk parameters are in place, and therefore a lot of these steps can be dropped, which are unnecessary today and requires a physical contact, be it certain steps in KYC, be it certain steps of verifications or diligences, be it the wet signature, etc. I think gradually they will all go away.
Very well said. In fact, let all the problems go away. In fact, when you're talking about the innovation, there was a legal expert said a very interesting thing. He said that the problem with the India is we are talking about a great innovation and building a flying car. The problem is not the challenge with the building flying cars. We will build a flying car, but nobody will know from where to take the regulation and the policy, to make it fly into the country. So, those are also the challenges. So, yeah. Abhishant, you tell me the more about challenges front, because we saw, the major issues with the fintech operating in, the consumer space. Maybe there is some positivity for the B2B fintechs. Going ahead, if you take the era of now post-pandemic and, the world after COVID-19, what kind of business models will emerge in fintechs? Or if I quick it a bit, what would be more successful for fintechs going ahead?
So उसको शायद मैं इस तरीके से कुछ समराइज करने की कोशिश करूंगा कि एक बहुत पहले मैंने लिखा था कि तेरे मेरे घुमाने से क्या ये करार घूमेगा, जब गधी से दिल लगाया तो गालिब बेजार ही घूमेगा. सो मतलब ये शायद पॉलिसी मेकिंग के मामले में बड़ा आता है कि अगर आप गधी से दिल लगा के घूमे हो तो फिर आपका मतलब आपका मयस्सर है, उसमें कुछ खास करा नहीं जा सकता है. तो कभी कभी हमारी पॉलिसी मेकिंग, जो नवीन बहुत सही बोल रहे थे, वो कभी कभी उस डायरेक्शन में जाती है जैसे वो मतलब वो लिफ्ट होती है ना, तो लिफ्ट का पर्पस क्या है कि आपको एक पॉइंट से दूसरे पॉइंट तक लेके जाए. अब हमारे वहाँ क्या है कि वो लिफ्ट में लिफ्टमैन बैठता है या पार्किंग में वो पार्किंग वाला बंदा रहता है जिसका काम एक बटन दबाना होता है, और वो वार्म बॉडी है जो बटन दबा रही है और आपको टोकन दे रही है. तो कर लो आप डिजिटाइजेशन जो भी करना है आपको, बट वो वार्म बॉडी. So somewhere my hope is this, that the future of fintech essentially doesn't have the need of that warm body, that liftman who will push कि अच्छा साहब 9वें माले पे जाना है और वो बटन दबाएगा, या फिर that essentially parking wala who will take out the token and give it to you, जिसको हम civics में जो है छिपी हुई बेरोजगारी कहा करते हैं, that essentially undefined unemployment. Now specifically coming to fintech as such, my belief is this, that you will see three value chains emerging.
First is you will see a lot of SaaS-based ecosystems emerging and getting intermingled with financial services. So SaaS fintech will be a key theme to observe over a period of time. And I am quite hopeful. And I was, so around a year back, we had an opportunity to listen to SaaS Bhumi and Girish, जो कि Freshworks के founder हैं, वो और मैं गया हुआ था गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया आईटी वालों के साथ में in Chennai, and we heard them in terms of what they were looking at. Now, around 6 months back, Freshworks has launched Freshworks for Startups करके एक program launch किया. So SaaS will increasingly become interested in financial services. That will be a key moment of awakening for fintech players as such, because the deeper manner in which a SaaS is integrated into the ecosystem, fintechs are very, very shallow in that sense, many of them in terms of their coverage of it. So SaaS fintech, I believe, is going to be an interesting play to look upon at. Second value chain, which will see an interesting play, is essentially going to be better utilization of the credit value proposition, credit card value proposition जो है आज के डेट में after so much of exposure and so on and so forth, also credit card numbers in market is again 57 to 60 million, which essentially is around 6 crore cards in market, out of which obviously there is a view that the unique number will be around 3.5 crore or 4 crore. So which means there is a lot of scope in credit as an instrument, and you will see a lot of entrepreneurs getting into card as a value chain, credit as an value chain, credit card as an instrument directly. Third, my belief is that, of course, that will take time, and I'm sure a lot of people will apply for it, which is NUE. And NUE will see a lot of changes which it will bring over a period of time, but still is at least 2 years away from the point of view of first one coming into market, because February is the time till which you need to apply. After that, RBI maybe will come 6 months down the line, will announce the winners in August next year at the same point of time. And after that, they will have 18 months to build. So which means that we are still talking about 30 months at this point of time for NUE to essentially realize, materialize, and to be present in public. What that will do is that it will disrupt market like anything in terms of creating islands of great connectivity. A Facebook, Geo, Google Pay kind of environment creating one island of connectivity, current NPCI value chain creating another island of connectivity, and so on and so forth. So they will possibly lead to great islands of connectivity, and we may for a short term have situation like China, wherein you have a Tencent and Alipay, who are great islands of connectivity and who do not talk to each other as such. Hopefully we will not have that situation, and hopefully there will be a payments in standard setting body which will essentially ensure that there is an interconnectivity between these islands of great connectivity. So that essentially I believe is going to be a third piece, but it will lead to huge adoption curve emanating out of it for entire wealth, insurance and other products, and of course other small sachet commerce and other things. It will lead to creation of that to a large extent. That I believe is going to be a third key piece to essentially measure upon and look upon as such. The fourth piece, which I believe is possibly you can crystal gauge a bit, is essentially a solution emerging on top of Kashi from the point of view of access to credit to the urban poor and rural poor and the agri value chain ecosystem and so on and so forth. So that ideally, my view is this, that it will again take 3.5 years, 4 years time for it to emerge on top of Aadhaar, on top of Narega-based databases and others. I'm privy to at least 2 conversations in central government wherein they are looking at these data points to essentially create much bigger ecosystem-led credit access platforms, which are essentially kind of supported, subsidized, FLDG provided by center and state to essentially build an ecosystem of credit access. So I think these 4 possibly will be an interesting pieces from my side to look upon it in future from a year to 3 or 4 year present.
Very interesting, Abhishant, and very valuable perspective. I will bring Mushir here. Mushir, you heard Abhishant talking about what kind of fintechs may have a greater scope in India. In last couple of years, we have seen the innovation which the Indian fintechs bought, and also the UPI ecosystem was created in India, has what you can say, raised the flag of India abroad, and many fintechs and the financial institutions from world were taking interest in India. Considering this background, what do you think is the scope for Indian fintechs abroad? How do you, from Hong Kong and look at India as one of the innovation hub? What kind of opportunities do you see for Indian fintechs in Hong Kong and many other countries?
A very pertinent question, right? We, as FinStep Asia, along with Medici and CFund, had launched FT Slingshot at the beginning of this year, primarily to take Indian B2B fintechs to Southeast Asia and Hong Kong, right? The main premise was three things. Number one, 97%, and this was, I think, an Economic Times survey done, about 96 or 97, 96% of all Indian founders have global ambitions from day one, right? Of which about 34 or 35% set out wanting to go out from day one as well, right? So they're building their company as internationally facing. Number two is, with all the experience that Indian fintechs have, especially on the B2B, the BaaS, if you may call it, right, point of view, they tend to be very strong while serving international markets. A, because they have served markets like USA, UK, Europe through the traditional channels. Secondly, founders in India are a unique breed in the sense you have many founders in the BaaS field or the B2B fintech who come from the banking world and have served technology for banks for a decade or more, right? So that gives them very deep insights. Number three is at the cost point, I think they're very competitive, right? So when you're going into markets like Singapore and Hong Kong, you're able to compete with all the international B2B players in terms of your quality, but when it comes to pricing, you're quite very competitive. So that plays a big advantage. And when you go into emerging markets or developing markets like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, the cost differentials aren't significant. They are a little different, but then there is the respect or the people find Indian technology to be highly competent. So there is an interest that comes in from the local banks, or at least the larger banks, when it comes to Indian technology. So from that perspective, I think it is going to be a space where Indian companies, like you've seen M2P come out and go into Southeast Asia. You're seeing a lot of others starting to do the same. And with the formation of the new NPCI International going forward, once they determine what the strategy is, we will see a lot more of the ecosystem also going in, not only to the developed world, but also the emerging markets in Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa. So I feel India's strength to go international is number one going to be on the BaaS field. Number two is going to be along with the UPI ecosystem. And number three is going to be the development that we will see of the Bharat piece of India, right? We always talk about, as Abhishan mentioned, the agriculture, the rural field, credit, all of these. The first 5-10 years of fintech in India was replication of models developed in US primarily, Flipkart, all of the others, even Paytm for that matter. But now you're seeing models that are being developed for India, right? For the Indian consumer, serving it in vernacular form and trying to cater it to the Indian population, especially in tier 2, tier 3 India, as we like to call it as Bharat. Once we are able to have some major startups, right, like Khata Book and all the others, you will see that model can be replicated in the large economies like Brazil, in some parts of Africa and Southeast Asia, which are heavily populous. Even take for that matter Bangladesh, which is our neighbor, right, where fintech is still very nascent. I feel that's going to be a major play as a number 3 part.
If I can just add into this, Amol, which is from the point of view of international, a few days back, myself and one of the VC in India market, we did a small understanding of कि अगर UPI itself अगर एक standalone company होता तो उसकी valuation क्या होती. Interestingly, after multiple permutations and combinations, we reached a point कि current valuation of UPI itself should be in the range of $3 billion. And that's the kind of impact and the kind of value it has generated and created. And if essentially it goes rightfully well and goes international, and obviously it continues to grow, it will essentially find huge takers for that, both internationally and otherwise. And I jokingly in a particular group had told Dilip that you should look at essentially getting for an IPO of NPCI
and we should all subscribe to it. At least government will make some money coming out of NPCI IPO.
Yeah, just adding to that, right? UPI probably has the ability to become the Swift of fintech for the emerging markets as we go forward, especially if they decide to make it more B2B and enable infrastructure outside of Bharat Pay. I think that definitely has an ability to become that.
Thanks, Mushir, and thanks, Abhishant, for that specific note on UPI. Naveen, I will come back to you. And when whole world is talking about contactless world, and we are seeing the bright future for the Indian fintechs, and we have obviously the payment revolution is amazing, no doubt about it. Then we're talking about the credit, and now crafting a lot of micro products. My question to you, Naveen, is connectivity is still a major problem, and everything is depend on the connectivity, whether it's payment, whether it's credit, whether it's micro products, and that is a major challenge for a lot of fintechs. So how fintech should resolve this particular issue, because that is a basic challenge. It's not only in the urban, but forget the rural, but the major challenges in urban areas as well.
So there are two ways to look at it, Amol. One is that should fintech solve this infrastructure of connectivity problem, or should they create products which can work even in such a shallow connectivity?
Right.
So of late, I'm sure you know enough of those companies. I can't name them, but they're out there in the market, where they have showcased applications in fintech world where just with your regular phone connectivity, with no Wi-Fi, nothing, you could still process transaction. We've even seen demonstration and example where even when phone connectivity is not there, certain transaction can still be stored and connected. And why go far? I mean, you talk to Rishi Gupta of Fino, he will tell you the whole story that even when they had to start the business, they had to have a mechanism where offline everything used to work and it used to sync at a certain point in time in certain way where the connectivity was available. So it's not that we don't know the answer. I think like some of us said that most fintech, because we see consumers like our consumers and we believe that they are the consumers, forgetting that we actually represent, even the founders of fintech, less than 5% of the population of the country, we believe there are certain things given. But the moment we forget that, hey, the real opportunity is way bigger and probably beyond us, then your product design start taking some of these points upfront as a consideration. That if you need to have a product which is good, now what is stopping others to use it is the experience, and the experience depend on the connectivity. So why can't you have the same product working across variety of the connectivities? Maybe as basic as a landline, again, back to that basics, maybe without landline, so some sort of offline process. And as I said, each of these technology talent know the various processes that they can hybridly combine. I mean, we know that when we did long back in my previous organization, a solution, we had again a similar process where transactions will be done offline or online depending on the connectivity, and will sync and make sure that the balances are written in the server as well as the card, but let's say, or the instrument, because the instrument will be used as a, let's say, first truth before you check anything else. So there are solutions available. Yeah, one has to think deeper. And I believe that is what will happen. At the same time, we all know that the way the connectivity improvement has happened at the same time. Let's say maybe it's bad, but it's there. The number of places that it is available today in last 10 years itself, when we started the business, even let's say 15 years back, and now you see it's changed drastically. Right. And if you look at again, next 10 years, then probably it is going to be even different. But that said, as I said, that there are challenges. What we need to still consider, which probably also requires that you to be able to do transaction without connectivity, is natural calamity. Right. So World Bank, along with certain other agencies, have been multiple time working and multiple years working, especially after Nepal disaster that happened because of the earthquake, to find a solution to reach money to those beneficiaries without any connectivity. And there were a lot of entities who really gave an input, and there were some solutions designed. The question is, why do we wait for those disasters to happen? Why can't build as a redundancy in our features? So it's all about founders' thought process. If you take it for given, then you build a product in a homogeneous way for a certain set of customers. Right. And then you reiterate, and then you keep doing the patchwork. But if you really sit down, think and say, hey, ultimately in Indian kind of a context, the relevance of every fintech product is the entire country, because the penetration currently is so low. So you need to have all those scenarios in place and have all those possible solutions at the back end, at least in your architecture fit in. You may still choose to roll out different places, but you have to think it through. And I think that will happen, and it is already happening.
Very, very interesting. In fact, sometimes when discussing about fintech and innovation, it doesn't know how the time passes. So we are, almost, what you can say, done with time. But I will still take quick questions with all of you. Just one question simply, because everybody wants to know what is the future going to be like. And Meghna, I will start with you. What do you see the future of fintechs specifically after the pandemic, or post pandemic? What kind of changes do you see in the fintech ecosystem?
So the changes that I see is that fintech is going to go completely phygital, which means physical plus digital, and any kind of banking services will be available to consumers, not only of Digital India but also of Bharat per se. One click at their mobile, whether they want to open a bank account, whether they want to get a micro loan, they want to get a credit card, they want to get insurance. Everything will happen one click in your mobile, and that's the future that I see in the next 6-8 months.
From the point of view of future, I think we discussed a bit. Maybe I'll a bit in short talk about the present as such. In the present as such, what will happen is that maybe in May, June onwards or so, or yeah, around May, June onwards or so, you will see these startups which are more on the consumer side of story, and there will be a bit of demand-led market adoption and market upward movement. So you will possibly see a lot of entities which are on the consumer finance side showing an upward trend starting from October, November onward, and possibly reaching back to earlier volumes in April, May, June types. You will see that. I think what you will also see is a very, very clear view in terms of how a consumer essentially is going to be identified. So how Amol Dethe is going to be identified as compared to Abhishant Pant, or as compared to Naveen, or as compared to Meghna. I think a clear identification model and differentiation of various customer sets will start becoming more and more obvious. What possibly will further happen is that a lot of businesses you will see who have been resisting the idea, and which essentially kind of, you can say, Naveen pioneered with its cash in early part of 2010-11, which was essentially around B2B commerce of it. A lot of business volumes will move towards B2B commerce starting, they have already started doing that. They will all move forward on that direction. In fact, some of the corporates told me that they now have a process in place up to 10 lakh rupees tak ka jo vendor payment hai, that essentially can be done fully digitally, which essentially means that this process, which has taken donkey's years to actually not move at all, at least a portion of it has moved. So you will see possibly a lot of upward movement on the B2B commerce side of it. And finally, while demonetization was the moment which led consumers to adopt to digital, the pandemic has essentially led merchants to adopt, and the merchant adoption of digital is far more significant in pandemic versus what it was of consumers in demonetization. So I think these are 4 pieces I would like to sum up.
Right, Abhishant. Mushir, what is your view? Obviously, we have discussed many things about what models will work, what kind of partnerships happen between Indian fintechs and global fintechs. But considering the changes that happened specifically in last 6 months, what kind of future do you see for the fintechs in India?
Yeah, one thing is for sure, Abhishant's billing is higher than 10 lakh rupees, so that's why the invoices aren't getting cleared, right?
Yeah, yes, let's hope that.
Jokes apart, I think one of the things I see in India and strongly believe is the TechFin 2.0, as I call it, right? Where now the tech giants are getting into financial services in a full-blown way. There's no more this hide and seek game of saying we are just supporting financial services, we're not so active in it. And India is becoming that market where everybody is basically all in some senses, right? Amazon has put billions of dollars, Facebook has put money into Jio, and otherwise Google Pay is continuing to grow, right? The only one missing is Apple from an ecosystem perspective, or Microsoft, but you have these players already there. And extending on the point about how are we bringing everything together, platformification and the dependence on data, the Swiggies of the world coming in and offering everything else is all about the platform game that Ant and Tencent built so well, which is now being extended to Grab and Gojek in Southeast Asia, and now what Jio's looking to do, right? So the TechFin 2.0 is going to be a major game changer in India as we reach 800 million internet users with ability to use the Jio phones to have feature phones also providing internet access. We will see a lot newer models. We had Tata announce last week that they are building a super app. Now there are 2 companies in India which are womb to tomb, right? Tata and Reliance. And if they're both getting into the super app game, I think that is going to reshape how we have delivery of services, and banks risk becoming pipes for financing, etc., and effectively supporting the tech ecosystem when it comes to delivery of financial services. The regulators may ease things up, but they may end up making, like in China, earlier the regulators had not necessarily tied the wallets to a bank account, but they have done that now. So you may have that, but you will see the tech fins driving a lot of change in Indian consumers, both in customers from a merchant perspective as well as consumers in terms of the end users.
Thank you for that note, Mushir. And Naveen, lastly, I will come to you. We have obviously spoke about many changes and, envisaged what may happen. But on a policy perspective, we have seen already, RBI coming with NUV guidelines, and, they already did many things like video KYC and all. Going ahead, considering that regulators have to boost and empower, the fintech ecosystem, what kind of changes would you like to see from the regulators perspective, specifically, to boosting the financial ecosystem in terms of fintechs or startups?
So I think we need to look at, you heard all of them, what the future looking like.
Yes.
And it actually translates in one thing which is true for India is unity in diversity.
Yes.
Rather diversification, right? So we need a unified law. We need a unified approach. We can't have SEBI asking for something. We can't have, even look at the capital side of issues, right? There is a view
Right.
of a SEBI when it comes to investment, even if it is from Mauritius or China versus what RBI takes. So we need a unified view, a unified policy view, keeping a unified world that is coming into.
Right.
We have customers who will buy Gucci, and we have customers who would buy a second-hand clothes probably used on the street. Both are commerce. And the masses and the numbers in terms of values, both are equally well, and everybody else in between. So if this is a world that is going to be in, actually India has a perfect opportunity to create a business model for the entire world at a mass, at a scale, which is completely on a digital rails, and still keeping, let's say, less connected, even no connectivity zones, all of that in mind. Because where else would you find, let's say, advancement of technology, infrastructure available, the customer ready to adopt, and at an age where you could experiment with all of that, and as such an energized ecosystem of fintechs for continuously bringing products. So if you could look at this integrated diversification, and policies are made that they address diversity, but in a unit, in a, let's say, integrated way or in a converse way, wherein most of the issues, if you look at fundamentally, fintechs are dealing with three things, right? Identifying the entities with whom they deal with, identifying the transaction and the risk associated with it, and the servicing of the customer. Of late, the trust on the servicing side has increased a lot because of either fraud issues, because of the risk issues, or ability, while probably the industry focus is only on selling, that is lacking. So let's say while we do it, at the same time, if regulator can kind of ease the whole identity and onboarding related challenges, and not just for one sector, one product, but across, which means we have to remove duplications from the chain and unnecessary activities come. If I've done KYC once, why should I ever be asked? I mean, this happens in mutual fund. Why can't we make it applicable across the sector? I mean, not across the sector, rather, I would say across financial services, and maybe eventually beyond that. This was a simple example. Like this, there are many simple, small things. If they just go away in a united and integrated way, I think there is a huge potential for us to grow and create a world-class model for the digital economy, which is what we are moving into at a scale. There's no better opportunity than this. And I think gradually the regulators are hearing. That's why we have FSLRC, which is at least all the regulators put together. Probably they need to take bigger charge of all these areas where there are complications. There are challenges like how do you deal with crypto assets? How do you deal with your central bank issued digital currencies? Now, all these privacy, all these are interconnected. We're trying to solve them one by one, maybe in a holistic way, but they also need to be looked at a much bigger aspect, that where all they also connect, even at the bigger level. And hopefully if that is done well, then probably will not just grow at a, let's say, 2 large digit, but probably 3 digit plus continuously for next 2 decades.
Very, very interesting, Naveen. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. And dear participants, that's it from my side. But I would like to urge you, if you really liked the conversation, if you understood the better perspective about what is going to happen with the future of fintechs, do like, share, and make comment by using the hashtag ETBFSI Converge. Don't forget that. And thank you so much, Naveen. Thank you so much, Abhishan. Thank you so much, Syed Mushir. And thank you so much, Meghna, for sharing remarkable perspectives on ETBFSI Converge. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for providing that insight. A questionnaire will be circulated after every session so that you can share your feedback on individual presentation and panel discussion. You can of course add reminder to receive alert before any of your preferred sessions start, and feel free to use the comment box during the session to get on-the-spot answer from our subject matter experts.